Happy Sunday, Inside Out. My name is Bree, and I'm so excited to get to be here with you all as we kick off a brand new series called Unmet Expectations. And if anyone knows what it's like to not have their expectations met, it's you guys at Inside Out. Over the last 8 months, you guys thought that we were going to get to go to the walk, to back to school bash, to senior weekend, and have all these fun inside outs inside the building with lights and mosh pits and worship songs and small group time. And in case you have been asleep for the last 8 months, that is totally not what has happened. Our expectations for life and for Inside Out have not been met at all. So we have expectations for life, but we also have expectations for other people. We place expectations on our friends, expecting that they will keep our secrets, and sometimes they don't, and our expectations are not met. But we also have expectations placed on us sometimes. And I know when expectations are placed on me, I feel the need to meet those expectations. I want people to think that I'm competent, that I'm capable, and that I can fit in and do the things that they ask me to do. And sometimes this leads me to do things that I wouldn't normally do in order to meet their expectations and to live up to the standard. And I think of one specific example of when this happened in my life, and it was actually all the way back in 3rd or 4th grade. I can't really remember. But when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, there was this girl in my neighborhood named Sarah, and she was so cool. I wanted to be just like her. We hung out all the time in the summer. We went to the pool together. We played in the neighborhood. We rode bikes together, and we also rode the bus together. And one time, we were riding the bus home together, and she thought it would be a good idea to crawl under the bus seats and tie this other kid's shoes to the seat pole on the bus. The idea being that when he got up and it was his stop at the bus, that he would be stuck to the seat of the bus, which is so mean. And I knew that. I'm a rule follower, and I was like, that's a horrible idea. We're going to get in trouble for this. But on the other hand, I was like, she's so cool. I want to meet her expectation. I want to fit in with her and her friends. And so I'm going to do what she is doing. And so I found myself crawling on the floor and doing what Sarah was doing and tying this kid's shoes to the bus seat pole. But I also found myself getting in trouble. And I know you guys can relate. We all do things from time to time where we do things that we wouldn't normally do. For you, hopefully you're not tying kids' shoes to the seat pole on the bus, but maybe you dress a certain way, act a certain way, or say certain things that you wouldn't normally say in order to meet others' expectations and please them. When we don't meet others' expectations, we are often faced with conflict. Think about it. When you are doing a group project and your group project is supposed to be done on Wednesday, but for whatever reason, you don't have your part done on Wednesday, your group is not going to be very pleased with you. They're probably going to tell your teacher that you didn't get your part done, and therefore your grade's probably going to go down. They might tell the others in the class, hey, you don't want to work with him or her because they didn't get their part done. And so you're going to be faced with conflict in that moment. Or maybe your parents expect you to get all A's, and what if you don't? Well, you might be faced with a conflict of getting grounded or not being able to hang out with your friends when you want to, or having to go to extra study groups. And so we find ourselves living in this constant struggle of to meet others' expectations and trying to please them and live up to the standard. And this is hard because people's expectations are always changing. Once you meet one expectation, there's always another one and another one and another one, and we just keep striving and trying. And also, what one person sees as a good expectation is not always what another person sees as a good expectation. And so the playing field is never even, and we're stuck trying to balance people's expectations and trying to please those around us. And this is a tiring cycle to live in. It's exhausting, it's draining, and it's hard. But the good news is that we weren't made to live this way. In fact, we weren't created to live this way. We were created for something better. In the Bible, there was this man named Paul, and Paul's primary job was to go around to churches and set up churches and tell people about Jesus. And there was this one church in particular called this church in Galatia, and the Galatians were super confused on what they were supposed to do in order to become Jesus' followers. They were confused because there's this other group of people called the Judaizers, and the Judaizers were telling the church in Galatia that they had to follow the Mosaic law, that they had to live up to all these expectations, follow the law, and then they could become Jesus followers. And Paul knew that this was wrong. He knew that they didn't have to live up to these expectations. He knew that they didn't have to follow these rules. And so Paul wrote the Galatians this letter telling them, hey, what the Judaizers are telling you is wrong. You don't have to follow these expectations. And in that moment, Paul knew that he was going to be faced with conflict. He knew that the Judaizers might hate him, might say bad things about him. They might even try to persecute him, but he didn't care. And in Galatians 1:10, he writes this, and he tells us where his courage comes from in that moment. He says in verse 10, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." And I love that because basically in this moment, Paul is saying, I don't really care about seeking the approval of the Judaizers, of the Galatians, or anyone around me. And I don't care about seeking their approval because I am called to something better. I am a servant of Christ. And because Paul was a servant of Christ, he knew that his approval came from God. He knew that God was the only one that he needed to be concerned about pleasing. And Paul also knew that he didn't have to try very hard to please God, simply because he already did please God, because he was a child of God. God already saw him, God already knew him, and God already loved him. And the same is true for me, and the same is certainly true for you, that when we don't meet others' expectations, we might be faced with conflict. We might not be invited back to that party. People might talk about us behind our backs or say mean things about us. But it's okay because the people that we are not trying to please are those around us. It's impossible to. Jesus didn't even please all the people around him. And as servants of Christ, the only one that we are concerned about pleasing is God. And it's comforting and restful to know that God already approves of us. And so we don't have to be concerned about seeking the approval of those around us because God already approves of us. He already approves of you. He sees you, he knows you, he loves you, and we don't have to be stuck in this cycle of striving and trying to meet the expectations of those around us because God already loves you, he already sees you, and he already accepts you. To me, this is super comforting, this is super freeing to know that I don't have to strive anymore. I can just be a servant of Christ and just look at God and wait for him to give me my next assignment and get my approval and my identity from him. And so it all boils down to one question. Are you going to seek the approval of those around you, or are you going to rest in the truth, knowing that God already approves of you and loves you?